into it and are saved. That name that is above every name.
Thank you, Lord.
Bible says, for there is none other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved. Jesus should be the most important name in your life. I'll dismiss our young people to their Sunday school class. Feels a little strange. Seems like a long time since I've been behind the pulpit. I'm looking forward to our 21, well, it's going to be more than 21 days of prayer and fasting, our month of prayer and fasting. I just urge you that should you choose to participate, come expecting. I'm going to do my best to, through this 21 days, to give focus to our prayer. It's important that we pray, that we talk to God. There's certain things that we come to God about, that we talk to Him on our own, that we don't bring to corporate prayer, but during corporate prayer, we should be focused and purposed, looking for God to do something in this church and in this city. And last year we did see God doing mighty things through our prayer, and I'm looking forward to greater things this year. If we can turn in our Bibles this morning to the book of 1 Kings, chapter 19. 1 Kings, chapter 19. Bear with me this morning. This whole last week, I don't know if it's from the dust from camp or whether I was fending off a cold, but my throat has been rather raw all week long, so hopefully we can make it through this today. 1 Kings 19, we're going to begin reading there at verse number 9. Speaking of Elijah, it says, and he came thither unto a cave and lodged there, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said unto him, what doest thou here, Elijah? He said, I've been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel that have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek to take my life, to take it away. And he said, go forth, and stand upon the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains, and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire a still small voice. And it was so, when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entering in of the cave. And behold, there came a voice unto him, and it said, what doest thou here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, because of the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life, to take it away. Lord, we thank you today, Jesus, for your presence in this house and for your anointing upon our minds, God. I ask, Lord, that you would just speak to us today, O Lord, that you would help us to receive from your word. Help us always to give all glory and honor unto your name, Jesus, because you are the one that is worthy of all honor. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. God bless you. You may be seated. A judge was interviewing a woman regarding her pending divorce and asked, what are the grounds for your divorce? She replied, "About 4 acres and a nice little home in the middle of the property with a stream running by." "No," he said, "I mean, what is the foundation of this case?" "Oh, it's made of concrete and brick and mortar," she responded. "I mean," he continued, "what are your relations like?" "I have an aunt and an uncle living here in town, and so do my husband's parents." He said, "Do you have a real grudge?" "No," she replied, "we have a 2-car carport and have never really needed one." "Please," he tried again, "is there any infidelity in your marriage?" "Yes, both my son and daughter have stereo sets. We don't necessarily like the music, but the answer to your question is yes." "Ma'am, does your husband ever beat you up?" "Yes," she responded. "About twice a week he gets up earlier than I do." Finally, in frustration, the judge asked, "Lady, why do you want a divorce?" "Oh, I don't want a divorce," she replied. "I've never wanted a divorce. It's my husband that does. He says he just can't communicate with me." In our world today, everyone's lives are busy. Hustling, bustling about, trying to fit 36 to 48 hours into the 24 hours that God has given us. There's so much going on, and everything around you is vying for your attention. But what it comes down to is that most of it is just simply just noise. Taking your attention, taking your concentration, drawing you away from what should be important in your life, and that's God. In the midst of all that noise, it can sometimes be impossible to hear God, especially when He speaks in a still, small voice. Which is what I'd like to speak to you on about for a little while this morning, what I've titled, The Whisper of God. Sometimes I feel that God would view us just like this woman's husband viewed her. He speaks, but we just don't understand. He tells us a direction, and we hear something other than what He's trying to show us. He offers us the way, but we don't really realize that that's the way to go. We just do our own thing because our lives and our minds are so bombarded by noise everywhere we turn. Our thoughts being drawn away by entertainment, our thoughts being drawn away by our work, thoughts being drawn away by the things of this world, and God is busy speaking to us, but oftentimes it's in that still, small voice, and it's just covered up by all the rest of the noise going on around. And we don't hear His voice. See, God can speak to you in many ways. Number one, it's through His Word. If you get into His Word, He's going to speak to you through that Word. He's going to speak to you through the man of God, our pastor. But we have to have ears, again, to hear. He's going to speak to you through the preaching of the Word of God. And these last two are kind of linked together because He's going to speak to you in that still, small voice, largely through the unction of the Holy Ghost, which oftentimes can feel like a whisper. We don't hear it as a booming voice. It's that feeling that comes when you go to do something. It's that feeling that comes when you go to say something that maybe you shouldn't say. It's that feeling that comes when you're walking by somebody in a store and God says, maybe you should tell that person about me. It's that whisper in the back of your mind. In the book of 1 Samuel chapter 3, we find the story of Samuel as the Lord called out to him, as the Lord started to give him instruction. 1 Samuel chapter 3, beginning at verse number 2. It says, "And it came to pass at that time, when Eli was laid down in his place, and his eyes began to wax dim, that he could not see. And ere the lamp of God went out in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was, and Samuel was laid down to sleep, that the Lord called Samuel, and he answered, Here am I. And he ran unto Eli and said, Here am I, for thou callest me. And he said, I called not, lie down again. And he went and lay down. And the Lord called yet again, Samuel. And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And he answered, I called not, my son, lie down again. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, neither was the word of the Lord yet revealed unto him. And the Lord called Samuel again the third time, and he rose and went to Eli and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And Eli perceived that the Lord had called the child. Therefore Eli said unto Samuel, Go, lie down, and it shall be, if he call thee, that thou shalt say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. So Samuel went and lay down in his place, and the Lord came and stood and called it as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel answered, Speak, for thy servant heareth. Samuel heard the voice of God. And my deduction from this passage that we've just read, the fact that Samuel heard that voice cry out to him, to speak his name as he would lie down at night, that voice must have been just a whisper. Samuel. Samuel. The reason I deduce this is if it had been a loud voice, surely Samuel would have woken up from his sleep and would have realized that it was a supernatural voice, to be able to hear that voice with nobody in his room. The fact that Samuel heard his name being called and got up out of his bed, and I don't know what the proximity of Samuel's room was to Eli's. I don't know if it was right next door. I don't know if it was down the hall. I don't know what the makeup of the walls in that building were, if they were stone and mortar or if it was wood. I know it wasn't wood and gyprock like what we have today. But I'm thinking Samuel laying down in his bed, the fact that he assumed that it was Eli in another room, somewhere else in the place where he was laying, it must have been just a whisper in his mind, thinking that Eli's calling out to him, and that's all that would travel to his room. So he would get up out of his bed and he would run into Eli's room, thinking that that's where it was, because it was just a whisper. Samuel, as God was trying to call out to him. We just read that Samuel did not at that time know the voice of the Lord. It wasn't easy for him to deduce that this was what was speaking to him. It wasn't easy for him to realize that God is calling me right now. God is trying to get my attention. But he would get up and go to Eli until Eli finally realized what was going on. I wonder today, is it possible that God whispers just to see if you're truly listening? But through all of the noise, through all of the things going on in your life, and God whispers into your life, is your ear tuned to what it is that he's trying to say? Or are we so consumed by everything that's going on around us? Are we so consumed with our work? Are we so consumed with our lives? Are we so consumed by things of this world that are drawing your attention away, that the voice of the Lord, being that whisper, is now being drowned out? Or do we get up in the morning and say, God, I want to hear your voice today. God, I don't want everything to drown you out. I want to know your voice. The Bible says that the sheep know the voice of the shepherd, and they follow him. And when you tune your ear, there are people in this world that are musically inclined. They can listen to a symphony and pick out notes of specific instruments going on amongst everything else that's in that symphony. They can, amongst the drums and amongst the tubas and amongst the trombones and amongst all of the equipment, all the instruments in that symphony, they can listen and they can hear certain things. I could hear that flute was off just a little bit. Or I could hear that maybe some stringed instrument, they just missed that chord that they were supposed to hit in that. Because their ears are tuned to hear those instruments. Their ears are tuned. They know exactly what it is they are listening for. And that's the way we should live our lives, saying, God, I want to know your voice. That when everything's going on around me and when my life starts to feel like it's falling apart or when everything's drawing my attention away from you, God, I want to hear that still, small voice. I want to hear that whisper when you call my name. When you have a direction for me to go. When you want to keep me from doing something I shouldn't do. When you are trying to save me from the things of this world, I want to be able to hear that whisper and know that it's you that's calling my name. Sometimes his voice is just that whisper, just at the very edge of your thoughts. He says, Cory, go here. Brother Beer, I've got something for you to do. Charles, go talk to this person. And are you listening for that name? Are you listening for that voice that's trying to speak to you? Right. See, that's a whisper sometimes that tells you that the world will never satisfy. A whisper that says, stop what it is that you're doing. A whisper that tells you to maybe try another path. Or maybe it's just that whisper that beckons to you, saying, come, follow me. You see, many of us are waiting for God to speak in this booming voice. As we picture in our minds, maybe God speaking to Noah. We're waiting for him as we go to do something for him to go, stop! Don't go there! But in reality, it's stop. I've got a better way. Follow me. You'll be safe. But we want that booming voice. We seek for that booming voice. Or maybe it's just me that imagines God talking to Noah this way. In Genesis chapter 6 and verse 13, it says, and God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come and come before me, and for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. And he goes on to give Noah some instruction, and then verse number 22 says, thus did Noah according to all that God commanded him, so did he. Now, I just picture this in my mind. I don't imagine, in my mind, God coming to Noah at the nighttime and whispering to him, Noah, I've chosen you. I picture God being angry, distraught that he had created mankind to the point that he wanted to destroy mankind. I don't view God coming to Noah and just whispering into his mind, this is what I want you to do, Noah. But maybe that's exactly the way it came. Maybe that's exactly the way that God spoke to Noah. But we envision in our mind, when we hear that story, at least I envision in my mind, Noah going about his day and God calling him, Noah. Where did that voice come from? Noah, this is what I have for you to do. Verse number 22 says, and he commanded him. So I envision this, that's the way God speaks. I envision that's the way God is going to speak into my life, but that rarely happens. I know a lot of people that have lived for God for a long time. And I only know I've ever heard of a few instances where people have heard God in an audible voice. Most of the time, people say that it's that feeling. It's that whisper that comes into your mind as God begins to speak. And sometimes we get confused because we're waiting for one thing and God's doing something else. We miss the voice of God because we want that booming voice. And then we get disappointed because we don't hear it. God, are you really speaking to me? Were you listening to the preaching the other day? God, are you really speaking to me? Didn't your pastor tell you some things a little while ago? God, are you really speaking to me? Didn't you just read some passages out of the Bible? God is speaking to you. God's whispering into your soul. God's beckoning you to follow him. God's drawing you to that place where you could know his voice and hear his voice. Maybe we're waiting for God to do just as he did for Saul on the road to Damascus in Acts chapter 9. Acts chapter 9, beginning at verse number 1, says, And Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest and desired of him letters to Damascus, to the synagogues, that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth and heard a loud voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And he said, Who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what wilt thou have me do? And the Lord said unto him, Arise, and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do. And the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. And Saul arose from the earth, and when his eyes were opened, he saw no man, but they led him by the hand and brought him unto Damascus. So we read this and we think, well, that's the way God must speak. Well, if I'm doing wrong and I don't get that booming voice, if I'm doing wrong and I don't get that light shining down from heaven upon me, if I'm doing something that maybe God doesn't want me to do and I don't hear that audible stop because you're hurting me, well, then it must not be God. But there's only that one instance in the Bible that God ever talked to somebody the way he talked to Saul. He never came and shone a light down on anybody else. I don't know how God spoke with Abraham, Joshua, David. But I know one thing, the passage that we read at the beginning. God's not in the earthquake. God isn't in the strong wind. God isn't in the fire. But God is in that still small voice. That when we can discern that voice, when that voice lines up with what the Word of God says, when that voice lines up with what your pastors told you, when that voice lines up and all of these things come together, you can be assured and say, that was the voice of God. Many times I believe that God has spoken to me in that still small voice. As I considered my time spent sitting on a bar stool, I didn't hear somebody say to me, why don't you go and try going to church? It was that whisper. It was that little thought that came into the back of my mind. Never thought of that. My life is going nowhere. My life is going to a place that I don't really want to go. I'm looking ahead to see all these people sitting on the bar stools just like I'm doing. And they're 50, 60 years old. I don't want to be here when I'm 50, 60 years old. Why don't you try church? Where did that come from? That was never a thought that I had had. That wasn't a voice of somebody coming and speaking to me. I believe it was that still, small voice. I didn't go rushing out to go find a church. But without realizing it, I believe that that was really the first time I started talking to God. And just said, God, where do I go? Lots of churches in this town. Lots of places to go. Where do I go, Lord? God sent me a wife that led me, directed me to where His truth was. All from still small voice. You see, I believe that there is something for us to learn in the scriptures we read about Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 19. Did you notice, and I just caught this the other day, how God asked Elijah the same question twice. And Elijah gave the same answer twice. He comes to Elijah in verse number 13 and says, "What doest thou here, Elijah?" In verse number 9. And then he asks the same question in verse number 13. But it's what came between those two questions where the lesson comes. You see, Elijah answered, and then God told him to go do something. He says, "Go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord." And that's when the Lord passed by in verse number 11. That's what he says, "A great and strong wind rent the mountains and break in pieces the rocks before the Lord." But the Lord wasn't in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. You see, this whole story takes place after Elijah. First, he prophesied to Ahab, there will be no rain. There was no rain. Then God told Elijah, go back and give Ahab some instruction. Elijah was a lone prophet, feeling like he's one of the last ones remaining. He even went so far to tell a servant, "I want you to go and tell Ahab that I'm coming." "Oh, no, I'm not going to go tell Ahab that you're coming. I'm not going in front of him because I'm going to go tell him that you're coming. You're going to go another way. Ahab's going to come. You're not here. He's going to kill me." Elijah said, "No, don't worry about that. I'll be here." "Well, I don't want to go tell Ahab that you're here after what you've done because he's going to kill me." Elijah said, "Don't worry about it. I'll be here." And Ahab came, talked to Elijah. Elijah told Ahab, "I want you to gather the 450 prophets of Baal together." Most of us know the story, how he called those 450 prophets together, and he says, "Why do you halt between two opinions? There's one God. And today we need to choose who it is that you're going to serve. So we're going to do a little test here. And you put your 450 prophets, you put all of your might together. You guys put up your sacrifice, call upon your God, and I'm going to do the same." Lone prophet Elijah, the one remaining servant of God, will do the same thing. The God that answers by fire. That's the God you need to serve. 450 prophets of Baal, they got their sacrifice together. They called on him from morning till night. Nothing. No answer by fire. Elijah gets his sacrifice ready, has them pour water all over it, make sure that everything's soaked down, because there will be no trickery. Nobody's going to say, "Oh, Elijah, you did this." No, soak everything, because God's going to answer by fire. He calls upon the Lord answers by fire, consumes the sacrifice, consumes the wood, consumes the rocks, everything that was there, all the water gone, answered by fire. Elijah proceeds to go off now and ensures that those 450 prophets of Baal are slain. Elijah's a pretty gutsy man to do all of this. He trusted in his God. He believed in his God. God was with him in all of this, did all this for him. Those 450 prophets of Baal belonged to Jezebel. So now Jezebel is mad. "And all that you did, Elijah, to my prophets, so I will do to you." Elijah, you just asked God to bring down fire onto a sacrifice, and God did. You went after 450 prophets of Baal and slew them all. You did that. Now you've got one woman that's after your life, and you feel sorry for yourself. And you go find yourself under a tree, and you're asking God to take your life because you're worried about this one woman after everything that God had done for you. That leads us to where we find Elijah. An angel even came and nourished him. I just want to die. He's in that place where his life feels like it's turned upside down. He's in that place in his life where he's overwhelmed, where he's consumed by his thoughts, and he's consumed, maybe it's depression, maybe it's a lot of different things going on in his life, and he doesn't know where to turn, and he, for some reason, forgets that he can call on God. So God comes along and asks him, Elijah, what are you doing here? Oh, poor me. I'm the only one that's left, and they're seeking to take my life. So it's like as if God says, okay, stop for a minute, Elijah. Stop right where you're at right now, because we're not going to go any further while you're feeling like this. Go onto this mountain, and the wind comes. God's not in the wind. Earthquake comes. God's not in that earthquake. Fire comes. God's not in that fire. But then the still small voice. He's saying, Elijah, I'm trying to show you something here right now. All this earthquake that's going on, I'm not in that. That wind that is blowing you to and fro, destroying the rocks around you, I'm not in that. Elijah, this fire, I'm not in that. But if you'll just hearken to my voice, if you will just tune your ear and listen, I'm in that still small voice. And I believe that it's at that point that he realizes, I've got Elijah's attention now. You see, Elijah, when he first asked the question, God first asked him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Elijah's still battling with that earthquake. He's still battling with the wind. He's still battling in that fire because that's what he feels in that moment. And God says, I want to get you past that till you can hear me. Right. Takes him to the other side so that Elijah's listening. Then he asks him again. After he's got his attention. Elijah, what are you doing here? Elijah's answer didn't change. The last one. They want to take my life. They want to get rid of me. But now Elijah's listening. And then God gives him instructions as to what he needs to do. See, up till that point, God probably felt like, I could tell you anything right now, Elijah. You're not going to listen to it. Because you're too consumed about where you're at right now, rather than listening to my voice. You see, your situation today may seem like a mighty tempest building up in your life. Things blowing around you, things going on. We get consumed by the things that are going on in this world. We can get our eyes off of God, and our attention gets on all of the craziness that's in the world around us. We can get consumed by the transgenderism and the gender identities. We can get consumed by the World Economic Forum, what they're planning on doing with the world. We can get consumed by all of these different things, by politics and social media and all of these things, and we get consumed by it, and we take our eyes off of God, and fear sets into our lives, and we go, well, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? How are we going to make it through this? What's going to happen in our lives? And God's just saying, just listen for my voice. Just hear that still, small voice. I'll give you direction. I'll help you through it. I'll take your hand and bring you along the way. Just listen for my voice. But that tempest rages around our lives. And we get consumed by the things that are going on around us. Or you could be listening to this thinking that, well, Where is God when it seems like that an earthquake has just shaken everything up in my life? Everything's going wrong. It's not going where I want it to go. Things aren't happening the way I want it to happen. And events happen in our lives that and again, it causes us to take our eyes off of God. We could look at the story of Peter in the boat. Those that were here last Sunday, we did the little skit for children's church there. Jesus comes walking along the water. The boat's being tossed to and fro in the water. There comes Jesus. Jesus, if that's you, bid me come. The waves were still blowing. The boat's still getting tossed. Jesus says, come. Get out of the boat. Peter gets out of the boat, walking on the waves, walking on that water. Everything's still being tossed. But he's got his eyes on Jesus. It's amazing to picture in your mind. And I don't think these were just little swells, little white caps, because they were worried. These were fishermen in this boat. Fishermen that had probably seen all kinds of bad weather when they were out in the water. And they were worried. They're probably getting to the place where maybe Jesus would only appear for a little bit. Wave would come up. Was that Jesus? Waves would go down and they'd be up on the top. There he is. And Peter got out of the boat in the midst of that, walking on those waves. I believe that when he got out, I don't think he was being tossed by the waves. I believe that his steps were steady. He was walking towards Jesus. Until he got out to that place where he suddenly realized, I'm out in the waves. I'm out in the water. I was worried back there. This is something to be worried about. But he got his eyes off of Jesus. That's when he began to sink. That's when he began to go down. Until Jesus walked up, took him by the hand, got back in the boat. And then Jesus calmed the storm. Whatever your situation is today, whether you feel like you're in the midst of the fire, God's not in that fire. God's in that still, small voice that's trying to speak to you today. He wants you just to listen for that whisper. But there's something that sometimes that you need to do in order to be able to hear that. And that's to get into that place and just be still. Psalms 4:4 says, stand in awe and sin not. Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still. Psalms 46:10, the first part says, be still and know that I am God. Isaiah chapter 40 and verse number 31 says, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. When you wait upon the Lord. See, there's power in the whisper of God. There's renewing in the whisper of God. There's also something very intimate and personal in that whisper of God. When that whisper comes, he's speaking to you and to you alone. God knows where you're at today. He knows where you're at every day. And I don't mean your physical location. He knows that too. God knows every battle that you fight, every war that rages inside of you. He wants to come along and say, peace. Be still. Because he's not in the earthquake that's shaking you up. He's not in the wind that's tossing you around. He's not in that fire that you feel like is burning you up. But if you just take time to be still, to say, God, I just want to be in your presence, then that still small voice comes and whispers to you. It says, I am here. I'll get you through the other side. I'll give you the victory that you're looking for. Just follow me. Some of the most powerful moments I've ever had with God have been when I've been waiting on him, just meditating on his word. And then he begins to speak in that still small voice. As that whisper comes and he starts to move in your mind, everything else disappears but his voice. Why don't we just take a few minutes today? No music today. Just us and God. One of my favorite verses to meditate on is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord. Thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. So I just want us to find a place to pray. Pray right where you're at. Maybe if you just consider Jeremiah 29:11 and ask God, God, what exactly are the thoughts that you think about me? You say that they're thoughts of peace and not of evil. What are those thoughts, God? And meditate upon that word. And allow God to speak to you. Let's just wait on him today for a few minutes.